In mid August every year, Himachal Pradesh's apple harvest peaks. At the same time, trucks begin lining up outside Adani Agri-Fresh's controlled atmosphere storage facilities in Roru. Farmers arrive with blue crates stacked high with apples, hoping that they can secure a slot before the warehouses fill up. Inside, the fruits enter something of a near hibernation state. Oxygen levels are lowered, temperatures hover around freezing, and the nearly 25,000 metric tons of apples can remain fresh for up to 10 months before being released into the market when prices are higher. For nearly 2 decades, this has been the business of Adani Enterprises' agricultural arm. Buy apples, store them, and sell them during the off season. But that ambit has just widened for them. On 9th May, the company announced its expansion into cherries, plums, and peaches, all fruits that are actually more perishable and more dependent on refrigeration and fast logistics than apples. Now, other conglomerates have their own fruits of choice as well. For example, Reliance has a mango orchard in Jamnagar with over 130,000 trees. Even Mahindra Group has its own grape export supply chains. Meanwhile, ITC has been expanding its fresh fruits business as well, as part of a 20,000 crore rupees push across its FMCG and agri businesses. But the thing is, for Adani, fruits themselves were never the main play. The play has always been infrastructure, the hypercooling facilities, the grading mechanisms, and the long haul transport. But now, the India New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, which was finalized this April, has made this infrastructure even more indispensable. As the import duty on New Zealand apples drops to 25%, Indian apple growers are going to need all the help they can get. And Adani AgriFresh is ready and waiting. Welcome to Daybreak, a business podcast from the Ken. I'm your host, Rachel Verghese, and every day of the week, my co-host Nikta Sharma and I will bring you one news story that is worth understanding and worth your time. Today is Friday, the 12th of June. One executive said that fruits were never part of Adani's core strategy. They told my colleague, the Ken reporter Sakshi Sadashiv, that Adani is in the ports, power, and airports business, and apples are hard to fit in there. But still, the company has a way of finding itself in sectors of national strategic importance. And this time, it found itself a nice little spot in a different, though equally essential part of the economy. You see, Gautam Adani actually began exploring what executives internally described as an exotic fruits opportunity all the way back in the early 2000s. And Himachal Pradesh, India's apple producing state, was a good place to start building post harvest infrastructure around horticulture. Another executive told Sakshi that back then, imported fruits such as avocados, kiwis, and premium apples were still relatively uncommon in the Indian market. That was how Adani AgriFresh Limited began. It now builds one of India's largest controlled atmosphere or CA storage networks under a government backed horticulture subsidy scheme. The company operates roughly 25,000 metric tons of CA storage capacity across three facilities in Himachal Pradesh, in Rampur, Senj, and Roru. That's well above the 5,000 to 10,000 ton range that's typical for other players in the space, by the way. On top of that, two industry executives claim that more recently, Adani AgriFresh has leased three additional hydrocooling facilities to accommodate its expansion into stone fruits I mentioned earlier. In the first 9 months of FY26, the company's operating income was around 110 crore rupees with a profit of almost 3 crore rupees. A year earlier, it posted an operating income of around 180 crore rupees, but at a loss of about 9 crore rupees. Now, it's definitely a tough business. Margins are thin, procurement costs fluctuate with weather, storage is capital intensive, and the fruits remain highly perishable despite the refrigeration. And even within apples, not every variety makes economic sense. AAFL or Adani Agri Fresh Limited almost exclusively procures mid range varieties. These are red enough to sell well in the fruit mandis, but still firm enough to survive long storage periods. That's because lower range fruit spoils too fast, while premium apples from places like Kinnaur, which is at a high altitude on the other hand, even though they're sweeter, juicier, and visually superior, hold too much moisture. And that makes them difficult to store for longer than a few weeks. One of the executives quoted earlier explained that they had actually tried to store Kinnaur apples a few years back, but they ended up pulling out because it was very difficult to retain their quality post storage. You see, the economics of the business hinge almost entirely on shelf life. The apples bought in August to September are stored for months before being gradually released into the market. But India's structurally weak yields make the whole thing a lot harder. Sanjay Agarwal, managing director at Devbhoomi Cold Chain, which is a cold chain and fruit distribution company, said that India's crop is not the best in the market and that it doesn't produce nearly the kind of yields global players do. To put that in perspective, New Zealand orchards yield 50 to 70 tons per hectare. Himachal Pradesh averages only about 7 to 8 and Jammu and Kashmir around 10 to 13. And that yield gap is going to start affecting Indian producers soon. More on this in the next segment. In late April, India signed its free trade agreement with New Zealand. The idea was to gradually lower import duties on apples under a phased quota system. It was a pretty politically sensitive deal, considering about 6% of India's total apple imports come from New Zealand. There's also a caveat that the imports will only be allowed in April to August, which is India's lean season, so that it offers some relief for growers in Himachal Pradesh and Kashmir because they've been dealing with price volatility and protests for years. On the other hand, the India UK Free Trade Agreement specifically excluded apples to protect domestic growers. But as a Himachal Pradesh government official explained, if storage, grading, and transport infrastructure isn't fixed, imported apples could steadily erode the market share of producers. Now, over the past 2 decades, India has tried to narrow some of this post harvest gap through subsidies and cold chain investments. But spending remains limited. In fact, in FY26, the Ministry of Food Processing Industries was allocated roughly 4,000 crore rupees in the union budget. But this is just a fraction of India's broader agricultural subsidy spend, which runs into lakhs of crores. That's what makes Adani's very early bet on CA storage and cold chain logistics look very much like foresight. And now, AAFL has just expanded into cherries, plums, and peaches, all fruits that are even more perishable than apples. For example, while apples can survive inside CA chambers for months, some cherry varieties need to move from orchard to market within just 7 to 10 days. Otherwise, the quality changes sharply. A Shimla based cold chain operator told us that for stone fruits, if the cooling chain breaks even briefly, the quality deteriorates immediately. But they also command high markups because they're highly seasonal and are in strong demand within the premium urban segment. Still, the expansion is cautious for now. Two executives told us that AAFL first plans on testing the waters with around 70 to 80 metric tons of cherries this year. For this, it has leased 3 hydro-cooling facilities with local APMC mandis in Himachal Pradesh. The company also often pays slightly above local mandis to lock in the grower relationships. The fruit is then graded, stored, and released under the Farmpick label during the off season, which is March to June. An executive explained that in a normal season, if mandis pay 70 rupees per kg, Adani pays 72 to 74 rupees. In tighter seasons, that gap widens, which can look like 80 rupees from the mandis versus 100 rupees from Adani. Once the fruits can be stored safely for 6 to 10 months, the whole supply chain shifts, and whoever controls refrigeration controls the market. What adds to this is the fact that AAFL is quite meticulous with payments. An executive told Sakshi that the company had never defaulted on payments. Most are settled within 2 days, which is why nearly 60% of the 2000 growers continue returning to the company every season. But there's one spoke in the wheel because the specter of climate change looms large. Stay tuned. Over the last few years, climate change has been quietly reshaping how quickly farmers need to move their fruit. Apple trees need winter chilling hours to flower properly. An apple grower from Roru, Shimla said that now winters are getting shorter and warmer. Snowfalls are coming in later, while hailstorms have become more frequent. Another grower in Kashmir put it quite plainly. 10 to 15 years ago, harvested apples could sit for days before transport. But now, farmers rush to sell quicker because the fear is always that the fruits may lose firmness or quality. The warming is already visible. In April, temperatures in parts of Himachal rose 8 to 12 degrees Celsius above normal. In lower districts, temperatures crossed 41 to 44 degrees Celsius, all while growers across Shimla, Kullu, and Kinnaur reported crop stress because of erratic snowfall and warm winters. And rising temperatures like this affect stone fruits like cherries even more so. Of course, as you may have guessed, the expensive answer to growers' woes is more controlled atmosphere storage. And expensive it is. In fact, industry executives estimate that building a 5,000 metric ton facility costs 60 to 80 crore rupees, while larger integrated projects often cross 120 crore rupees. Understandably, most growers can't afford these kind of build-outs and are forced to sell immediately after harvest, even at weak prices. This gives AAFL a lot of power. The Shimla based cold chain operator we mentioned earlier said that being the largest CA storage operator gives Adani pricing power with retailers, first mover lock in with growers, and influence over price discovery. And this marks a real shift in India's fruit economy. The emphasis is no longer on cultivation alone. Who can grow more, harvest faster, and secure a better mandi price. Instead, climate volatility, rising perishability, and global competition are tilting the scales towards those who control what happens after the harvest. And Adani is perfectly poised to make the most of that shift.
Daybreak is produced from the newsroom of the Ken, India's first subscriber focused business news platform. What you're listening to is just a small sample of our subscriber only offerings. A full subscription offers daily long form feature stories, newsletters, and a whole bunch of premium podcasts. To subscribe, head to theken.com and click on the red subscribe button on the top of the Ken website. Today's episode was hosted and produced by my colleague Rachel Varghese and edited by Rajiv Sien.